Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights, and let the dread begin. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I feel like I need to tell someone what's happened. Jake and I had been together for 3 years when we started talking about getting engaged. We both loved antiques. Items with history and stories embedded in them. Every weekend, we'd hunt together through antique shops and estate sales, searching for all sorts of forgotten treasures. That's how we found the ring. The perfect ring. At least that's how it felt then. It sat in a locked case at Madame Eloise's shop downtown. A deep blue sapphire set in an intricate gold band with delicate filigree. Art Deco. Unique. Perfect. I knew it immediately. Jake, ever the romantic, insisted on buying it then and there. He shooed me from the store, promising to make it special. 2 weeks later, on a warm evening, he led me to our favorite park bench beneath the willow tree we always loved. He knelt, eyes bright with excitement, and presented a small velvet box. I knew what was inside before he even opened it, but when my eyes finally fell on the ring itself, my heart stuttered, and I seemed to forget everything I knew. My mind went blank. "Where did you get this?" I asked, fingers hovering over the gold band. Jake grinned. "You know where." And I did know, of course. My brain was just temporarily mush, I guess. It was the ring from Madame Eloise's shop. But inside the band, something new gleamed under the lamplight, an engraving. LMJC. I ran my thumb over the initials. Lucy M. and Jake C. Jake shrugged. It was already there. Fate, right? The night air seemed to press around us. Something cold curled in my stomach. "What are the odds?" I whispered. "I'm not a statistician," Jake laughed. "But I think it was meant to be." We drank champagne under the willow, and I fell asleep that night with the ring on my finger, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. Then the nightmare started. I dreamed of a bride in a blood-spattered church, sobbing behind her veil. When she turned to face me, her face was bruised and tear-streaked. I woke gasping for air, my chest feeling like it was about to explode. "Bad dream," Jake mumbled, pulling me closer. "Just nerves," I lied, glancing at the sapphire gleaming in the darkness. The next morning, things got so much worse. My neighbor waved as I collected the mail. The sapphire caught the sunlight, flashing blue for just a second. 5 minutes later, her brakes failed as she backed out of her driveway. Her car plowed into an oncoming delivery truck. I watched paramedics pull her mangled body from the wreckage. I tried to convince myself it was a horrible coincidence. 1 in a billion or something. But then my boss dropped dead during a meeting later that afternoon, just moments after complimenting my ring. An aneurysm, they said. I saw how his eyes fixed on the sapphire right before blood trickled from his ears. Deep down, I knew I had been cursed by the ring I loved so much. I had become a walking omen of death. On my way home that night, still in shock, I witnessed a man glance at me, then climb up to the ledge of my apartment building and jump without hesitation. The thud his body made when it hit the pavement will haunt me forever. His dead eyes found mine in the crowd. I clutched my hand to my chest, and the sapphire felt warm against my skin. Too warm. When I looked down, I noticed a faint burn mark on my skin. Around midnight, I decided it was time to remove the ring. But my finger had swollen. The band wouldn't budge at all. No amount of soap, ice, or oil could loosen it. As the days continued, so did the deaths. A barista touched my hand while returning change. Minutes later, he choked to death on a scone as I waited for my cold brew. An elderly woman who admired my ring at the grocery store was crushed beneath collapsing shelves moments later. At dinner with friends, I kept my hands hidden under the table, but Melissa insisted on seeing the ring. The moment the sapphire caught the light, a waiter carrying cherries jubilantly tripped. The dessert's high-proof alcohol splashed across nearby tables, igniting instantly. The entire restaurant went up in flames. In the chaos, I watched Melissa's hair ignite, her screams swallowed by the roaring inferno. Only Jake and I walked out unscathed. After 8 deaths in a week, I was desperate. I started keeping my left hand hidden whenever I was out in public, stuffing it deep into my pants or coat pockets. I also began Googling the ring online. It was such a luxurious and unique ring. I was curious if it had a history. It didn't take long to find the original owners. Lydia M. and James C. LM. JC. Just like our initials. The newspaper article from 1952 was brief but chilling. Local bride found slain on wedding night. The accompanying photo showed Lydia wearing my ring, and she looked just like the woman in my dreams. Something else disturbed me too. Jake had changed. His once warm brown eyes now seemed glassy and unfamiliar. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the ring with an expression I didn't recognize, possessive, hungry. When I mentioned the deaths, he'd shrug them off as coincidences. When I suggested we research the ring's history together, he changed the subject. I began to research alone, visiting libraries and local historical societies. I found more articles about Lydia and James. They'd been high school sweethearts. James had given Lydia the sapphire ring as a symbol of his undying love, a family heirloom passed down through generations. But on their wedding night, something had gone terribly wrong. The police found Lydia's body in their honeymoon suite, strangled. James was nowhere to be found. For weeks, the papers speculated about his whereabouts. Had he killed his bride and fled? Had they both been victims of a robbery gone wrong? 6 months later, James's body washed up on a riverbank 50 miles downstream from the bridge, where his car had been found abandoned. His death was ruled a suicide. In my search, I discovered an old woman who claimed to be Lydia's cousin. She lived in a nursing home on the outskirts of town. When I visited her, she recognized the ring immediately. "You need to get rid of it," she whispered, her papery hand clutching mine. It was cursed by James's great-grandmother, a woman scorned. She wanted revenge on the family that had rejected her, so she placed a curse on the ring. It brings death to anyone who sees it, except for the wearer and their beloved. She leaned closer. "But there's a price for that protection." "What price?" I asked. "I think your souls," she said. "I can't be certain. I only know James wasn't himself after he gave Lydia that ring. It changed both of them over time. The night he killed her, his eyes were different. I had seen them myself, empty, like you were staring through a window. Like Jake's eyes now. The old woman told me how to remove the ring. It had to be done on a new moon. There was a mixture I needed to prepare, herbs and oils and other things I won't mention here. The process would be painful, but it was the only way. The next new moon, I prepared everything as I was told. Jake watched with those unfamiliar, glassy eyes as I submerged my hand in the mixture. The pain was excruciating, my skin blistered on contact, but it worked. The ring loosened. With one final, agonizing pull, I wrenched the ring free. My finger came with it, severed cleanly at the knuckle. Blood poured from the wound, but I felt only relief as the sapphire glowed with rage. Jake lunged for the ring, but I was faster. I dropped it into a cloth bag and tied it with red thread 7 times exactly as instructed. We drove to the old bridge at the edge of town. The bag seemed to get heavier with each mile, and I could swear I heard scratching coming from inside it. At the center of the bridge, we stood in darkness, staring at the black water below. No moon reflected on its surface. "Are you sure?" Jake asked, his voice finally his own again. I nodded, clutching my bandaged hand. "It has to end." He held the bag over the railing. For a moment, it seemed like he couldn't let go, like the bag was stuck to his hand. Then, with visible effort, Jake opened his fingers. The splash below was small. The ripples disappeared quickly. "It's been 3 weeks. No accidents. No deaths." Jake is himself again, though he remembers everything. We both do. When Jake and I drive over that bridge, we both fall silent, staring at the water below. Sometimes I dream of the river bottom, of silt slowly covering the cloth bag, of water flowing endlessly over hidden things. In these dreams, I see fish swimming near the bag, then darting away suddenly. The ring is down there, waiting. Is it truly contained, or simply biding its time? When I wake from these dreams, my missing finger throbs with phantom pain, and I wonder if somewhere in the darkness of the river, a sapphire pulses an answer. Just as the title states, I clean abandoned houses for a living. I'm quite proud of myself, as I have worked hard starting my own business at just 24 years old and building it to what it is now. I specifically targeted these types of cleaning jobs as you can charge much more than your average 1 to 3 times per week house cleaning jobs of inhabited homes. Plus, I rarely ever have to see anyone other than my team while on the job. Over the years, I have really been in some insane situations with these houses. Everything from encountering wild animals to once a deranged squatter taking up residence in the homes I clean. There is one house that stands out from the rest, however, one that haunts my dreams to this day. I got the job offer through a real estate agent I made my friend over the years in this business. It's a small home, not much clutter left. Amila, my real estate friend, said over the phone. Shouldn't need more than one or two of you to complete the clean, she continued in her enthusiastic voice. I rolled my eyes. I hated when she used her customer service voice on me. Yeah. What's the real deal with this house? I answered in my usual half-annoyed tone. Amelia responded more normal this time. Honestly, Lori, this house gives me the creeps. The granddaughter inherited a couple of years ago, but has just recently decided to sell. The grandmother apparently died in the house. I rolled my eyes again. Death in the houses I cleaned was nothing new to me, and Amelia was well aware of this. Amelia continued, I cut my pre-visit to the house short last week. Didn't even make it upstairs where the grandmother apparently passed. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming in this one. That got my attention. Amelia had been in real estate longer than I had been in the cleaning business, and she took her get-to-know before showing visits very seriously. Anyway, I recommended your cleaning services to the granddaughter, and she agreed right away. Do you accept? She finished. Yes, I accept the job. How soon can we get into clean? I answered, feeling somewhat excited. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. As I mentioned, the granddaughter removed most of the clutter from the house, but it still needs a good TLC cleaning. The key will be left under the welcome mat, Amelia said, back in her customer service voice. My eyes rolled yet again as I ended the call. Finally, an interesting clean, I thought as I then dialed Morgan. The next day, my most trusted cleaner and best friend, Morgan, and myself drove up the horribly overgrown driveway and saw the well-aged small house come into view. Surely, they will need to hire an outside maintenance and renovation crew, I thought as I climbed out of my cleaning van. Morgan whistled as we stepped on the small creaking porch. You sure just you and I can handle this, Lori? Morgan asked as I fetched the house key from the weathered porch mat. If the outside is anything like the inside, we need the whole damn team, Morgan stated as she stood behind me. Amelia is over the top, but would never underestimate a cleaning job. I answered as I slid the house key into the old lock and turned until I heard the lock give way. I then pushed the door open as it made the usual ominous creak. We were both silent as we stepped into what I assumed was the small living room. The musty smell of a far too long closed-up house filled my nose as my eyes scanned the darkened room. Just as Amelia said, not much was left in the room. A couch took up most of the room on the right. A small wooden coffee table sat directly in front of it, coated in a thick layer of dust. I noticed a few photographs still clung to the walls. Let's get the supplies from the back of the van and get started, I said over my shoulder to Morgan. I have dinner plans and want this done long before. A bit later, I was scrubbing the dirty windows of the living room while Morgan opted to start upstairs. Lori, I heard Morgan call from up the stairs located just behind me. What? I called back. It was silent for several minutes as I waited for a response. I felt my aggravation growing as Morgan did not respond. I threw my rag on the floor and wiped my sweating brow as I turned and headed towards the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my feet as I climbed to the upper floor. You better have a damn good reason for interrupting me and not answering, I yelled as I reached the final step. Goosebumps covered my skin when I stepped onto the old wooden floor of the upper level. Weird, I mumbled to myself as I looked around. The upper level was a small hallway. 2 rooms were located on each side as I peered down the dark corridor. Morgan, I called in a softer voice this time. No answer. I slowly headed down the hallway, wishing I had thought to bring my flashlight. I always hated working with no electricity, but it came with the job. I could see the light of day from the open door on left side of the hall. The other door on the right was closed. As I looked into the open door on the left, I saw Morgan standing still, looking at the bed located on the far side of the room. It moved, Morgan said in an almost whisper. Huh? I answered as I walked in and stood beside her. The bed. It moved on its own while I was cleaning the floor, Morgan said, still staring down at the bed. I then noticed the bed was crooked now. The bottom was several inches away from the wall, where the top was still flush with the corner of wall. Do you see it? Morgan then said, even softer now. I almost couldn't hear her. Instead of questioning her, I looked down towards the bed that her eyes were glued to. I instantly saw what she was talking about. There was an imprint on the bed the shape of a body, as if someone was laying on the bed that very moment. The chills were really covering my body now, and I felt myself actually shivering. It felt like someone was staring up at us directly from the bed. I slowly reached for Morgan's arm and gently pulled her towards me. Let's go back downstairs, We will finish the bottom floor together," I said, matching her whispering tone. Morgan didn't respond, but obeyed my request. The feeling of eyes on us did not leave as we headed down the small hallway to the top of the stairs. I had to fight the urge to run down the flimsy steps. Once we were safely down in the living room, the air somehow felt easier to breathe, if that makes any sense. "What the hell was that?" Morgan demanded, finally sounding more like herself. I ignored that question. "Look, you know I hate skimming on jobs, but let's get this level done and get the hell out of here." I grabbed my cleaning supplies and headed to the next room, which was a small kitchen. Morgan stayed close beside me as we worked in silence, cleaning the sink, counter, and cabinets. We both froze after hearing what sounded like footsteps above us. "Don't," I said in a warning tone as I went back to cleaning dust and mice droppings from the cabinet. Morgan again obeyed and stayed silent as she went back to work on the counter. The footsteps continued moving around above us on and off as we quickly finished in the kitchen. The last room branched off from the kitchen that appeared to be a small office. I was so relieved we would be out of there soon. This room had stained and worn down carpet covering the wooden floor. I turned on our rechargeable vacuum, and the loud buzzing sound almost deafened me, but I was glad for it. Working in eerie silence was not normal for us, as we usually chatted and listened to music, but I was too rushed to fool with conversation or a playlist right now. "What the actual hell?" I heard Morgan yell out over the sound of the vacuum. I jerked my head up to see Morgan staring up at the ceiling, looking terrified again. Just as I cut the vacuum off, I heard what she had to be referring to as the buzzing sound died down. I can only explain it as the choking or coughing, gurgling sound of an elderly person. It was only for a split second I heard it, but that was enough. "Screw this," I yelled as I grabbed up as many of our supplies as I could. Morgan joined me in grabbing up the rest. We dashed out of the office, through the kitchen and living room, and out the front door. I was pretty much sprinting to the van, while trying not to trip on the mess of the yard. Just as I got to the van, I heard Morgan shout, "Wait." I turned to see her a few feet behind me. I left my supplies upstairs. We also didn't finish cleaning up there. We didn't even clean the bathroom, which must be up there. "I'm not charging the freaking client. We can buy new, whatever supplies are left. Get your ass in the van." I didn't wait for a response as I jumped into the driver's seat. Morgan hurried and threw the supplies in her arms in the back and slammed the door. I took one final look at the house as she slid into the passenger seat. I couldn't be sure, but it almost looked like someone was peering out of one of the two upper windows. I started the van. Hearing it roar to life was pure heaven in that moment. I floored it out of the driveway and back into town. I later called Amelia to explain the job was not complete and I would not be charging. The granddaughter would have to find someone else to clean that nightmare. This has been a couple of months ago, and I was not kidding when I said this horrid house still haunts my dreams. It was only last night I dreamt I was in a bed, staring up at an old, cracked and familiar ceiling. I felt weak and frail as the weight of someone crawling on top of me took the air from my lungs. I felt cold hands around my throat squeezing tighter and tighter, that awful gurgling, choking sound coming from my mouth being the last thing I heard as I woke up in a cold sweat. The marks are still visible on my throat today. I'm going to start this by saying, I love my husband. I truly do. He didn't start out like this. We've been married for about 5 years now. Up until this point, blissfully so, I might add. I met John at a party during our first year of college. Biology major like me. He seemed to say all the right things, knew all the right people, and he was quite attractive. We clicked immediately. After only one conversation, I'd fallen hard for him. Hook, line, and sinker. It wasn't long before we were dating. It all happened so fast. In a whirlwind of a year, we went from being introduced, to moving in together, to engaged, and then married. In hindsight, I know I moved too quickly, but it didn't feel that way at all. It was like I'd known him forever. I was never so sure of anything as I was that John was my soulmate. The first indication that something was wrong came about a month ago. I'd woken up from a dead sleep in the middle of the night to the sound of running water. Looking over, I noticed John wasn't in bed, so I got up to go look for him. I found him in the kitchen. He was standing at the sink, and as I crept closer, I could see that he was just staring blankly at the water pouring from the faucet. I reached out my hand and gently placed it on his shoulder, inadvertently breaking his trance and causing him to recoil back like a snake. "Shit. Oh honey, I'm sorry," I said. He didn't reply. He just began wiping his face and gasping, trying to catch his breath. Was he sleepwalking? He'd never done that before. "John, are you okay? What in the hell were you doing?" I asked, reaching over to shut the faucet off. I don't know," he stammered. "Guess I was thirsty." John was always such a smartass, in a playful way, of course, but I could still tell he was rattled by it. It seemed like he had zero recollection of how he'd gotten there. However, in the moment, I tried to shrug it off and shuffled him back into bed. I had work early the next morning, and I knew if I stayed up any longer, I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. I cuddled up next to him, trying to settle back down into slumber, when I noticed John's body felt a little cold. He must be coming down with something, I thought. Or maybe my cooking had made him queasy, and he just didn't want to say anything. I closed my eyes for what felt like only a second before my alarm clock began screaming at me. The next morning played out normally. We ate breakfast together, got dressed, then headed off on our separate ways. In fact, the next few mornings went just that way. He didn't seem sick. It didn't seem like there was anything wrong at all. It wasn't until almost a week later that the next incident occurred. John had come home late from work that day. As I made dinner, he walked into the kitchen looking stressed out and distracted. Like he had a problem in his mind that he was desperately trying to work out. Not really an odd occurrence in and of itself, though. He'd often bring his work home with him. But this time, he looked distraught, almost upset. "Hey, you alright?" I asked him. He slumped down onto the bar stool and leaned his body forward. Resting his elbows on the island, he began rubbing his temples. "Yeah, I have a headache," he said. "Oh, I'll get you some Advil." No, it's okay. You finish what you're doing, I can get it." I smiled and walked from the stove over to him, leaning over the island to kiss his forehead. When my lips met his skin, I was shocked by two things. One, he was ice cold to the touch. It was like kissing a refrigerator. And two, I was immediately hit with the bitter taste of salt. Reflexively, I pulled away. Then he looked up at me, his eyes slightly bloodshot and cradled by dark circles. "You're getting sick," I said. "Sonia, I'm not getting sick. I'm fine. It's just a headache." I threw my hands up in frustration. "I can't afford to catch whatever you've got, John. You know how much I have going on at work right now." Suddenly, he slammed his fist down on the island, so hard that it rattled the keys and pocket change sitting beside him, then yelled, "You don't think I have a lot going on right now, too?" My heart dropped, and I shuddered, instantly taking a step backward. He'd never done anything like that before. Hell, he'd never even raised his voice at me. I didn't know how to react, but I didn't have much time to think about it before he started apologizing profusely, saying he didn't know what had come over him. I accepted it as an isolated incident, though. Just an outburst caused by a combination of stress and illness, I thought. After all, I'd heard that men turn into babies when they get sick. I didn't cuddle up to him in bed that night, though. Not just because I was worried about him being contagious, I was also pissed off. I faced my night table and stared at my alarm clock for a while, wondering if we'd just been in the honeymoon phase all this time. And now, the real John was starting to come out. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of cinnamon rolls, my favorite. I glanced over at the clock. 5:41 a.m. John must have felt so bad about his tantrum the night before that he'd gotten up early to surprise me with breakfast in bed. I pulled the covers closer to me and smiled, waiting anxiously with my eyes closed. Suddenly jolted back into consciousness by my alarm, I realized I must have fallen back asleep. I slammed my hand onto the top of it, frantically searching with my fingers for the off button. I squinted at the blurry red numbers. 6 a.m. It was time to get up, and he still hadn't come. Maybe things didn't go quite as smoothly as planned, and he was in the midst of some type of kitchen mishap. I threw the covers off of my body and made my way to the bathroom. As I passed the counter, I glanced down and noticed his shaving kit was out. He'd always leave it on the bathroom counter every morning after he used it, and I'd always put it away. He must have gotten up really early. I grabbed the kit and shoved it back into the drawer on my way out. While walking down the hallway, I called out to him, but he didn't answer. I turned the corner to discover the kitchen was empty. A tray of cinnamon rolls sat on top of the stove, untouched. I said his name a few more times, but nothing. I shuffled over to the front window of our house and looked toward our driveway. He was gone. What the fuck? I went back into the kitchen to find a note left on the island. "Sonia, I'm so sorry for last night. I had to go into work early this morning, so I wanted you to wake up to something almost as sweet as me. Love always, John." I rolled my eyes and smirked. He was still the same John. I was just overthinking things. I mean, it was only natural at this stage of our relationship that we'd start seeing parts of each other emerge that we hadn't seen before. I shoved a cinnamon roll into my mouth, and then began looking for a Tupperware to put the rest away. As I chewed, my taste buds began to detect a flavor that had no business being in a cinnamon roll, causing me to wince. Salt. I spat the bite out into the sink. Did he accidentally use salt instead of sugar? I went to the trash can to throw away the roll I'd bitten into, and saw the empty Pillsbury canister sitting on top. Okay, so he didn't make them himself. Why in the hell did he add salt to them? Was this a joke? Is that what he meant in the note by as sweet as me? I walked back over to the stove and tasted another cinnamon roll, then another, and another. All of them full of salt. Some of them even felt soggy, like they'd been dipped in salt water. For Christ's sake. I threw the whole batch into the trash can, annoyed. We couldn't really afford to be wasting food like this, especially for a stupid prank. I crumpled up the note and started getting ready for work. That afternoon, I'd already decided I was going to confront him about those goddamn salty cinnamon rolls when he got home. I didn't find it to be funny at all. In fact, the more I thought about it throughout the day, the more it pissed me off. What on earth would possess him to do something like that? By 7 p.m., dinner was ready and he still hadn't arrived. I was starting to get worried. I called his cell phone, but he didn't answer. Instead, he texted back almost instantly. Hey, sorry. Super busy right now. I'll be home soon. Ugh. Did he know I was angry and was just avoiding me? He was well aware that would only make it worse. I made myself a plate and plopped down on the couch, flipping through the channels before landing on some nature documentary on the Discovery Channel. By the time I'd finished eating, he still hadn't come home. I glanced down at my phone. No texts or calls. I got up, shut off the TV, and threw my plate into the sink. I left the rest of the food out on the stove and headed to the bathroom to shower, annoyed. He can just deal with it all himself whenever he decides to come home, I thought. When I walked into the bathroom, something stopped me in my tracks. His shaving kit. It was sitting out on the counter again. I was 100% positive I'd put it back in the drawer that morning. He had come home at some point during the day and shaved again. My heart fell to the bottom of my feet. There was no way. John wouldn't cheat on me. He just wouldn't. But why would he need to shave again in the middle of the day? And why was he so late getting home from work? I stared down at the shaving kit, almost angry with it for being there. I decided not to put it away this time. I'll admit, I cried in the shower. Just a little. Seems ridiculous now to have cried over something like that. I didn't have proof of anything, just an inkling that something was off. But I can't blame myself for that moment of weakness. I didn't know what I didn't know. I couldn't have. I washed my face and composed myself, then reached down to grab my razor. When I did, I noticed there seemed to be this strange buildup forming around the edges of the bathtub. It was like a white gritty sediment. I looked down at the drain, and it was starting to crust up right there too. Gross. Must be calcium buildup. I'll have to pick up some cleaner at the store, I thought. I got out of the shower and got dressed, glaring at the shaving kit. I didn't even go into the kitchen to see if he'd made it home yet. I just went straight to bed and started scrolling through YouTube until I found some mindless video to keep me company. It was my intention to stay awake until I heard him come in, but sleep found me much faster than I expected. It wasn't until I felt movement beside me that I realized he'd finally made it in. I squinted through the pitch-black room, trying to read the numbers on the clock, when I began to feel the icy cold drip of liquid landing on the side of my face. I slowly turned to see my husband leaning over me. His eyes were lifeless and glassed over. His mouth was downturned and hung open, and he was completely fucking drenched in water. I screamed and threw the covers off, flying out of bed to the other side of the room. John, what the fuck? His mouth was still hanging wide open, but he wasn't saying anything. He was just, well, it sounded like he was gurgling. Horrified, I flipped the light on, and he instantly covered his face with his hands. John, what is going on? I screamed. Why are you all fucking wet? He removed his hands from his face and blinked several times while looking down at his body, then mumbled. Shit! I must have not dried off enough before I got into bed. Dried off? From what? The shower. The fucking shower? He looked like he had just fully submerged himself in water, and then immediately got into bed. A huge wet spot in the sheets surrounded him, and droplets of water were still trickling down his face from his soaked hair. What? That doesn't make any sense. I yelled. He shot up from the bed and whipped the comforter onto the floor behind him. Jesus Christ, Sonia. I get home late from work, exhausted, and now I gotta explain why I'm wet. My throat tightened, and I looked at him with complete and utter shock. I actually questioned if I was dreaming this. "John, you're scaring me." He stood there for a moment, his fists balled up and his chest convulsing with heavy breaths, before saying, "I'm going to sleep on the couch tonight. Sorry I scared you." He picked up his dripping pillow and stomped out of the room, shutting the door behind him. I'd gone from angry at him, to disturbed, to downright terrified. He was having some kind of psychotic break. That was the only logical explanation for all of this. The increased pressure at work was getting to him. Or maybe he had a brain tumor? Oh God. Either way, something was seriously wrong. This was so beyond anything in the realm of normal that I just couldn't let it go. I mean, if I had $1 for every time my husband crawled into bed with me while soaking wet, well, I'd have $1, which is still too fucking many. I put new sheets on the bed, then crept over to the bedroom door and pressed my ear up to it. His snoring echoed through the silent house. I crawled back into bed with only a couple hours until it would be time to get up. There was no way I'd be able to fall back asleep after all of that. But I didn't know what else to do with myself, besides lie there in the dark and think as I listened to the rhythmic sounds of his obnoxious mouth breathing coming from the next room. There was no way around it. John was going to have to go see a doctor. I just wasn't sure how I was going to get him to do that, considering how touchy he was about the subject of being sick. And not to mention his sudden unpredictable and strange behavior. If I couldn't convince him with words, there was no way I could physically force him to go, especially not now. I tossed and turned, trying to rationalize in some way what was going on. My scientific mind couldn't help it. But my specialty didn't focus on the human brain, or on humans at all, actually. It was coastal ecology. Basically, my job consisted of studying and working to protect the entire ecosystem of our coasts. My husband's wheelhouse was marine biology. He worked as an entry-level research assistant in a lab. We were both extremely logical, sound-minded people before all of this. I can't stress that enough. At around 5 a.m., I heard his snoring stop abruptly. My heart began pounding in my chest, and I quickly turned over, pulling the blanket up to cover my face. There I was, so afraid of my own damn husband, that I was pretending to be asleep just to avoid interacting with him. I listened to his heavy footsteps approaching the bedroom, then a pause, followed by the slow creak of the door opening. Terrified to move a muscle, I held my breath and my entire body instinctively locked up, like when a cuttlefish spots a shark. I couldn't see his eyes on me, though. I felt them. The door began to creak again until I heard it latch back closed. Only problem was, I wasn't sure if he was outside of the room or not. I couldn't believe where I'd found myself. If someone had ever told me that one day I'd be hiding under the covers from my husband, like a child afraid of the boogeyman, I would have laughed, then told them to fuck off. The toilet flushed from the bathroom across the hall, and I finally let out the breath I'd been so desperately holding. I still didn't get up, though. Over the next hour, I listened to him shower, shave, and get ready for work, all while I lay there like a hermit crab who'd recoiled into its shell. When I finally heard the front door close and his engine start, I jumped up from bed and ran to the bathroom. I'd had to pee for so long I thought I was going to explode. I sat on the toilet, rubbing my eyes as they adjusted to the light, when I caught sight of something shiny in my peripheral vision. But when I turned to look, I didn't see anything. I walked up to the mirror and began inspecting myself. I looked like absolute shit. Not even the best concealer in the world was going to cover up those dark circles. I turned on the faucet to start washing my face and noticed John's shaving kit sitting out. Out of habit, I picked it up. When I did, I hadn't noticed it had been left open, so the contents came spilling out onto the floor. Shit! I bent down to begin picking everything up and immediately froze. On the ground, scattered amongst his razor, shaving cream, and aftershave lotion, was about a handful's worth of silvery iridescent fish scales. I stared down at the ground, suspended in motion, as my brain scrambled to make sense of what my eyes were seeing. Had there been a gas leak in the house and John and I had both been hallucinating this whole time? That would have explained a lot, actually. Slowly, I reached out my hand to touch one of them, just to make sure it was real. Not only was it real, it didn't feel like you'd expect a discarded fish scale to feel. It wasn't thin or rigid or even brittle. Instead, it had this strange, soft, rubbery texture to it, and it was slimy like it was fresh. Oh, hell no! I shrieked, flinging the scale across the room. It went flying and stuck to the wall when it hit. The sensation of it lingered long after it had left my fingers. I felt disgusted, like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. My thoughts raced as I scrubbed my hands with dials several times. What could he possibly be keeping these for? He must have taken them home from work and thought his shaving kit was his briefcase. But no, why would he have them just loose like that? The lab wouldn't have even let them leave the area without being in a specimen bag, at least. Unless he'd snuck them out, why would he do that? My head was spinning. It was all too much. I walked out of the bathroom, leaving everything on the floor where it had fallen. As I started getting dressed for work, I came to the obvious conclusion that I had to start investigating. I couldn't just sit around and wait for the next bizarre event to take place. Things were escalating, and quickly. For both my sake and John's, I needed to take action. I could try to get a look at his phone, but who knows when I'd get that chance. There was only one thing I knew for sure I could accomplish that day. I went over to my field bag and dug out a pair of gloves and a plastic specimen container. Then I went back to the bathroom and carefully collected a few of the scales on the floor. I picked up John's things, including the remaining scales, and shoved them all back inside the kit. I threw my gloves into the trash, then placed the shaving kit onto the counter, unzipped and exactly where it was before. I didn't want him to know what I had found. My starting point was finding out exactly what type of fish the scales had come from. That might point to why he had them in the first place. I'll be honest, even though it seemed like I was looking for logic in the decision-making of a madman, I felt like I had to do something. When I got to work, I went straight over to Jessica's station. I glanced around to make sure no one else was in earshot, then said, "Hey, I need you to do me a weird favor, unofficially." She smirked and said, "Okay, tell me what it is first, then I'll tell you if I'll do it." I took a quick look around the room again, then reached into my bag and pulled out the scales, holding them out toward her. "I need you to run an EDNA PCR analysis on these." She looked down at the container in my hand and raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you find them?" she asked. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "All right, spill it. What's going on, Sonia?" I clenched my teeth, then leaned closer to her and whispered, "I found them in John's stuff. I'm guessing he must have taken them home from work, but I don't know why." Seriously? Sonia, I'm swamped with a backlog of water samples to get through today, and you want me to spend a few hours doing this? What? You think he's trying to smuggle out some forbidden fish scales to sell on the black market or something?" She laughed. "Jessica, look, I'm seriously freaked out, okay?" The words came out more frantic than I'd intended, my voice beginning to tremble. Her facial expression instantly shifted in response to my tone. "What's going on?" she asked. "Honestly, I don't know. John's just been acting really weird lately, and then this morning, I found these. I'm just trying to figure out if he's hiding something, or if I need to make him an appointment with a neurologist." Her hand shot up to cover her mouth. "Oh God," she whispered, looking off and pausing for a moment before asking, "Weird like how?" "Just not his normal self." I didn't want to even begin to try to explain what had been going on. It would make me look just as crazy as it would him. But if I could just help John, if I could find a way to fix whatever was going on with him before anyone found out about it, then I'd never have to. We could just go back to how things were before and forget any of this ever happened. A few hours later, I looked up from my station to see Jessica standing over me with a very serious look on her face. "We need to talk." I gulped hard. Shit. What had she discovered? Whatever it wasn't good, judging by her worried expression and hurried pace. I followed her back to her station, my heart pounding in synchrony with every step I took. "What did you find?" I asked. "Nothing," she replied. "That's the problem." "What?" "Sonia, I can't identify these scales. They don't originate from any known species in the database, living or extinct. The closest comparison I can make is possibly something from the Sternopticidi family, but these scales are much bigger." She handed me a piece of paper, and I glared down at it in disbelief. 5 scales, 5 tests, and each result came back as a sample of unknown origin. The implications of this were unnerving, to say the least. And the family of fish she had referred to? When I researched it later at my desk, I learned that it mainly consisted of species of deep-sea hatchetfish. John didn't even study those types of fish. He dealt exclusively with marine life that inhabited the epipelagic zone, where light could still easily penetrate the ocean's surface. Hatchetfish were from the mesopelagic zone, also known as the twilight zone. That was about right. I was no closer to having any type of answer. In fact, by digging into this, I had only brought about more questions for myself. I don't understand how this is possible, I said. She looked at me with concern and lowered her voice. Does John have any connections to experimental labs, or possibly even a biotech company? She asked. What? No, of course not. Well, whatever he's working on, it's not mainstream. I can tell you that much. I took a deep breath. Maybe John wasn't losing his mind, after all. Maybe he'd gotten himself involved in something unsavory, or even illegal, and he's been trying to cover it up. Maybe all that crazy shit was just to throw me off, or distract me. Please don't tell anyone about this, okay? I begged her. Shit, you don't have to ask me twice. No offense, Sonia, but I'd rather not be involved anyway. This is encroaching on fringe territory. That word scared me. Fringe. John was obsessed with his work. Once he found a thread, he'd pull at it relentlessly until he reached the spool. If he had fixated on something unconventional, well, there was no telling how far he'd take it. I spent the rest of the day agonizing over what I should do next. I couldn't focus on my work at all. Every time I saw my boss, I'd hurry and pretend like I was in the middle of something, when in reality I didn't accomplish a damn thing that day. That included figuring out my next move. After work, I sat in my car in the parking lot until about 6 p.m., paralyzed with inaction. Nothing I thought of seemed to be the right choice. If I confronted him about any of it, God knows how he'd react. On the other hand, if I just didn't say anything at all, he'd think he was getting away with whatever he'd been doing and continue. Suddenly, I felt a buzzing coming from my back pocket. It was a text from John. Working late? It said. Shit, time's up. I steadied my hands and texted back. On my way now. I drove home completely on autopilot. You know those drives where you end up at your destination with no memory of actively driving to get there? My mind was completely elsewhere. This was my last chance to come up with any plan of action, but instead, my thoughts played on an endless loop, each one bleeding into the next. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. At the front door, as I turned the knob, I made the last-minute decision to just wing it. I didn't know what I was walking into, so how could I even begin to try to prepare for it anyway? As a rule, I preferred to be proactive rather than reactive, but in this case I didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. I threw out any hope of strategy and resigned myself to respond accordingly to whatever stimuli befell me. As I walked inside, I was instantly hit with the rich aroma of tomatoes and garlic, something Italian. He knew it was my favorite. I slowly shut the door behind me. As soon as I did, he cheerfully called out from the kitchen. Hey Sonia, can you smell what the John is cooking? God, that stupid joke. The few times he actually did cook, he always pulled that one out. Never got a laugh out of me. But he never quit trying. Yeah, John, I can smell it, I replied, humoring him. At least he was in a good mood, I thought. Best not to rock the boat. My heart was still pounding, but so far, things seemed normal. I put my bag down in the coat closet and shut the door to it, then made my way down the hall and into the kitchen. He'd made a huge mess, but he looked so proud of himself, smiling and wearing his goofy ass kiss the chef apron. Spaghetti? I asked, sitting down at the island. Nope. I did you one better, lasagna. He exclaimed. No way. Wow, that must have taken you forever. It wasn't too bad. Just had to watch a couple YouTube videos. It should be ready to come out of the oven any minute now. I just looked at him and smiled. It felt so good to have John back. He seemed so happy and carefree, cracking jokes and trying to wipe the splatters of red sauce from the walls before they dried. For a moment, I let all my dread and worry fall away and settle in the furthest corners of my mind. I just wanted things to be normal again so badly. I know I've been acting a little weird lately, he said, jolting all of those feelings back to the forefront in an instant. I swallowed hard. And I'm really sorry for that, he continued. Should I confront him now? Was this my opening to start asking him questions? I didn't want to kill the mood, but this seemed like my only chance. I opened my mouth, and then the kitchen timer went off. Oh, it's ready. Let's see how I did. Why don't you go find us something to watch? I'll make you a plate and bring it in there. Okay, I replied. I went into the living room and flipped on the TV, surfing until I landed on Old Reliable. A rerun of Deadliest Catch was on. He walked in and handed me my plate of lasagna soup. He hadn't let it set before he cut into it, so the contents had bled out all over the plate. But it still tasted just fine. He sat down beside me on the sofa with his own plate, then looked over at me and eagerly asked, So, how is it? Really good. I mumbled through a mouthful of pasta and sauce. A huge, toothy grin stretched across his face, and he said, "I know you found my scales, Sonia. Have you ever looked at your reflection and felt something was off? Like it wasn't just a reflection, but something more? Something watching? I never gave it much thought before. Mirrors were just mirrors, ordinary, harmless, a part of everyday life. I had passed by them, glanced at them, adjusted my hair in them 1,000 times without a second thought. But that changed the night I got the emergency alert. That was the night I learned the truth. Mirrors aren't just reflections. And sometimes they look back. I had been up for hours, buried under textbooks, drowning in notes, trying to cram as much information into my brain as possible. The next morning, I had an exam, one I wasn't prepared for, no matter how much I studied. My laptop screen flickered in front of me, its glow the only light in my otherwise dark room. My fingers trembled slightly, a side effect of too much caffeine and too little sleep. My body begged for rest, but my mind wouldn't shut up. I ran a hand through my hair, sighing. The words on the screen were blurring together, my vision swimming. Maybe I just needed a break, just a quick one. A splash of water on my face, maybe brushing my teeth. Something to wake me up. That's when it happened. A vibration. A short, sharp buzz from my phone, barely noticeable over the quiet hum of my laptop's fan. At first, I ignored it. Probably just another spam notification. But then the screen lit up, the glow casting eerie shadows across my cluttered desk. I reached for my phone absent-mindedly, my toothbrush already in my mouth as I walked toward the bathroom. I unlocked the screen without thinking, glancing at the message. Emergency alert. Cover all mirrors immediately. Do not look into any reflective surfaces. Do not attempt to interact with your reflection. I frowned. What? My groggy brain struggled to process it. An emergency alert? Like an Amber Alert? A weather warning? But why mirrors? I blinked at the words, my thoughts sluggish. Then, out of instinct, my eyes flicked up, and my reflection wasn't brushing its teeth. I felt it instantly, that horrible, sinking feeling in my gut, like stepping off the last stair when you weren't expecting it. My body stiffened. The toothbrush was still in my mouth, the bristles pressing against my teeth. But the other me, it was just standing there, watching, unmoving. A chill crawled up my spine, slow and suffocating. My hands turned clammy, my skin prickling with cold. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, too quiet. The air pressed against my chest, thick and heavy. I should have looked away. I should have backed out of the room, turned off the light, done anything but what I did next. I stared, because something inside me needed to be sure. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe this was my brain playing tricks on me after hours of studying. But then, the reflection tilted its head, and I didn't. A sharp jolt of terror shot through me. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I stumbled backward, my hips slamming into the bathroom counter. The toothbrush slipped from my fingers, clattering into the sink. My breath hitched. My pulse pounded against my ribs, hard enough that I swore I could hear it. The reflection still didn't move. It didn't copy my panic. It just stood there, staring at me, its head still tilted at that unnatural angle. Buzz. My phone vibrated again, the sound making me flinch. I tore my gaze away from the mirror, just long enough to glance at the screen. Rules to stay safe. Do not look into the mirror. Cover all reflective surfaces. If you see your reflection move, do not react. Do not let it out. My stomach twisted. The words blurred together, my hands shaking too much to hold the phone still. I needed to cover the mirror. That was the logical thing to do, right? Just cover it. Just stop looking. I took a shaky breath and forced my feet to move. A slow, careful step forward. Another. I reached for the towel hanging beside the sink, my fingers trembling. That's when my reflection smiled. Not a normal smile. Not my usual lopsided grin. This was something else. It stretched too wide, showed too many teeth. A grin that wasn't mine, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I grabbed the nearest towel, heart hammering against my ribs, and threw it over the mirror. The fabric slapped against the glass, falling in uneven folds, covering it completely. Then, I took a shaky step back. Then another. I kept my eyes locked on the covered mirror, as if expecting something, anything, to move underneath. My hands were ice cold. My fingers twitched at my sides, useless and numb. My body felt too stiff, too alert, like every muscle was bracing for something to happen. My breath was shallow, quick. A part of me kept waiting to hear a rustle, for the towel to slip, for something beneath it to shift. But it didn't. It just hung there lifeless. I forced my gaze down, swallowing against the dryness in my throat. My phone was still clutched in my trembling hands. I flicked my thumb across the screen, desperate for anything, an update, an explanation, something that would tell me this was all just a misunderstanding, a mistake. Another message came through. Do not acknowledge it. It knows you've seen it. A chill shot through me, deep and sharp. It knew. What did that even mean? I sucked in a breath, but the words stuck to my ribs, heavy and suffocating. I didn't like the way that message was phrased. Like, it wasn't just my reflection. Like it was something else. Something aware. I tried to shake off the uneasiness clawing at my mind. This was ridiculous. I was tired. Stressed. My brain was just, heh. And suddenly, I heard a laugh. Soft. Muffled. Coming from behind the towel. I stiffened. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. The air felt thinner, as if something was pressing against my chest. I wasn't crazy. I heard that. My skin prickled with something worse than fear. I held my breath, straining to listen, but no sooner had I registered the sound than the laughter faded. Gone, like it had never been there at all. I let out a shaky exhale, but my body wouldn't stop trembling. My muscles ached from how tense I had become. I ran a hand down my face, gripping the edge of the sink to keep myself steady. What is going on? Then, a whisper. Low. Close. Too close. You covered the wrong side. My stomach lurched. And then it laughed. Loud. Wrong. The kind of laughter that shouldn't exist. Something deep in my chest told me not to listen. Not to process it. But I couldn't stop myself from thinking about the words. Wrong side? What does that mean? What side? I turned my head slowly, every nerve in my body screaming at me not to. My breath hitched in my throat. In my peripheral vision, the towel was still in place. Motionless. It hadn't moved, but I knew what it was trying to do. It wanted me to doubt. It wanted me to check. I swallowed, my throat clicking dryly. I wasn't going to fall for it. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't going to give it what it wanted. So I stayed still. My legs felt locked in place, my hands curling into fists at my sides. My fingers dug into my palms, the sharp pain grounding me, keeping me from panicking. The towel was still there. I could see it, but I could also feel it. Something. Watching me. Something smiling. I clenched my jaw, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I flicked my eyes down to the screen, desperate for something, anything that could tell me what to do next. Buzz. Another message had come in. Do not speak to it. Do not touch the mirror. If it speaks, do not respond. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing air into my lungs. Then, the whisper came again. Soft. Taunting. I can see you. My stomach twisted. My vision swam. A sound followed. A tap against the glass. Then another. Light. Rhythmic. Like fingers drumming in slow anticipation. The air thickened around me, pressing down on my skin. I needed to get out of the bathroom. Now. I turned, heart racing, my fingers reaching for the doorknob. And froze. Because in the reflection of the doorknob, I saw it. A hand. Not mine. Pale fingers pressing against the other side of the mirror. I bolted out of the bathroom, slamming the door so hard the walls trembled. My breath came in sharp gasps, too fast, too uneven. My chest ached with the effort. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and typed frantically into Google. Emergency alert mirror warning real? No results. No news articles. Nothing. The world hadn't changed. Outside my room, everything was still normal. But my world? A sharp buzz jolted through my fingers. Another message. Do not search for answers. Do not seek help. Do not look directly at it no matter what you hear or see. Wait until sunrise. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. Wait. That was it. Just wait. A wave of nausea curled through me. My stomach twisted. Then another thought hit me. I am being monitored. They knew I had searched for answers. They knew what I was doing inside my own house. My throat dried up. And if they knew? Oh my God. I ran a hand through my hair, my fingers tangling in the strands. Panic clawed at my ribs, pressing against my lungs. Then, a sound. A slow, deliberate scrape. Coming from the other side of the bathroom door. I stiffened. Don't look. I really didn't want to look. But I did. And I saw the wood splintering. Something was scratching at it. From the inside, my pulse pounded against my skull. Then, the scraping stopped. The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was thick, heavy, waiting. My ears rang in the absence of sound. I was so not doing this. I was happy with my normal life. My boring, simple life. What the hell was this mirror thing? Then, knocking. Soft. Rhythmic. Knock. Knock. A cold shiver ran through my spine. I bit my lip so hard I tasted copper. Then a whisper. Right against the door. You looked, didn't you? My stomach twisted into knots. I had looked. When the alert had told me not to. I gripped my phone so tight my knuckles ached. Another buzz. Another message. You must not turn your back on it. My breath caught in my throat. I turned. The towel had fallen from the mirror. And my reflection was no longer alone. There was something else in the glass. Not just my reflection. Something taller. Its head was slightly tilted, as if studying me. Its mouth stretched too wide, too unnatural. And its hands, they were pressed against the glass. From the inside, my reflection stood beside it, smiling. A wrong, twisted smile. My breath hitched. My body locked up, a deep, primal fear rooting me in place. I needed to cover the mirror. I needed to. The thing moved. Slowly. It raised one hand, thin, pale fingers dragging down the surface, and knocked. Not on my side, but inside. Knock. Knock. The glass bulged outward, like something was pressing through. The air in the room curdled. My phone buzzed violently. Another alert. Leave the room. Do not return until morning. I didn't hesitate. I ran. Morning. The sun rose. The countdown on my phone hit 0. A final message appeared. The mirror is safe for now. Do not look into it until nightfall. Do not speak about what you saw. It remembers. I hesitated. Then, step by step, I crept back to the bathroom. The mirror was normal. Just a mirror. No scratches. No handprints. No bulging glass. I almost convinced myself I had imagined it, until I checked my phone camera. And in the reflection behind me, something grinned. It's been a week. I haven't looked into a mirror since. But I can feel it. Watching. Waiting. And last night, I swear, I saw my reflection move. Before I did. All right, pack your bags, it's time to go. The voice behind me was deep and gruff, but still had a smoothness about it. It startled me, as I believed I was currently home alone, apart from the elderly old English sheepdog curled up across the room. I knew the voice was coming from directly behind me, maybe only a foot or two away from my ear. I spun around sharply, not entirely sure what to expect once I did. What I found when I had turned around, though, was definitely not what I anticipated. Standing behind me, looking directly at me, was what could only be described as the Grim Reaper. His long, black flowing robe hung off his body and drifted around in the air. 2 skeletal feet poked out from underneath the robe, which was swaying in a manner that looked more like it was floating in water. The bright whiteness of his bones directly contrasted the deep black of his cloth wrapping. I saw that he was also holding in one hand his trademark scythe that he was holding with long, bony fingers that wrapped around the scythe handle, like vines desperately clinging to a pole. What struck me and definitely frightened me, however, was his face. Well, I say face, but what I really mean is that it was his lack of a face that truly disturbed me. Looking directly at me was a hooded skull. No skin or muscle was attached to the skull. Instead, all there was bone. I knew straight away that he was staring at me. He didn't have any eyes, just empty eye sockets, but I knew that he was somehow looking at me. It took me a second to process what I was staring at, and Death himself must have realized that I looked scared because he acknowledged it in his next sentence. "Whoa, you look like a deer in the headlights of a truck that is delivering venison," he said, a hint of jovial comforting in his voice. "Yeah, you're just not who I expected to see, that's all," I replied. "You know who I am then?" Death asked me in a manner that seemed to imply that I shouldn't know who he was, even though all evidence pointed to the fact that he was the Reaper. "Of course," I responded, "you're Death. I can't believe that we actually depicted you correctly. You look exactly like I thought you would." "Well, I wouldn't say that you depicted me correctly at all. I just manifest myself in this weird getup so that you might recognize me, not because this is how I really look." I pondered this thought for a moment and decided that it made sense. It would have been a truly remarkable guess to accurately depict Death, as it's usually the case that anyone that sees him doesn't survive long enough to draw him. "I think you can guess why I'm here," Death asked me. He almost seemed sad to be here, talking to me, but he also spoke with a calm professionalism that hinted at the fact he had been in this situation before. "I mean, I can guess why you are," I answered, "but why me? And why now?" I'm not ready to go. Not many people are, but it would really make my job easier if you just follow me without a fuss. People that make a fuss often find that their ending is a lot messier. Death finished his sentence, and then gave me a look that seemed to beg me to just come quietly, as he couldn't be bothered with a messy death today. I don't exactly know how he gave me this look, him being a skeleton and all, but somehow he conveyed this look with just his bone structure. I'll come quietly, I promised Death. But first, I have a question or two. Death sighed. Of course you do. What happens if I did refuse to come with you? I asked, secretly hoping that there would be a way to get out of my sticky situation. I told you, Death replied, sounding slightly annoyed. It will get messy. You might even end up featuring on one of those unsolved mystery crime shows, and I'm sure you don't want that. He was right, I didn't want that. I wanted a peaceful death that didn't leave my beautiful wife and 2 kids wondering what happened to me. How will I die if I do come with you then? I asked, scared of what his response would be. Gas leak, Death replied, rather nonchalantly. Oh, so peaceful then? Of course, I know you're a decent man. Don't want you to have a terrible end. So, what happens when I come with you? I mean, what's after this? I asked Death, hoping he would be able to answer, and hoped that the answer would provide me with some comfort. You will just have to find out for yourself, won't you? I don't want to spoil anything for you. I know how much people hate spoilers. Why do I have to go? Can't I just stay in this world, even as a ghost or something? Well, you see, there is a slight problem in that department. Like your world, the spirit world is facing a similar problem. Overpopulation. The spirit world is full. We went a bit overboard with the whole ghost thing in Victorian times, and now there are no spots left. The old bastards refuse to move on as well. So unfortunately you have no choice but to move into the next plane of existence. Death said in a manner that seemed like he was fed up with being asked this question. I see. So this is it then. The end of the line for me. I'm just going to cease to exist. I asked Death, knowing full well that this was exactly the case. Yep, now we really must get going. I'll be late for my next appointment. Appointment? So is death not random? Is it already booked in? I asked. I always thought that death was a random occurrence, and not something that was planned out in advance, but it seemed that death ran on a schedule. It's determined the day you are born. On that day, your name appears in my diary, and that day is set in stone. There is no changing it. That day is the day you die, no ifs or buts about it. So, I was always meant to die today. It appears that way, yes. I know it's a bummer, but you will get used to it. I couldn't believe that I had been destined to depart the world on this day. I had always been meant to die at this very moment. I wish someone had let me know this fairly important piece of information. Maybe some sort of reminder on my phone or something. Just something that said, oh hey, you're going to die in a week. But no, it creeps up on you, and before you know it, your day has come and you're not ready to go. I wasn't packed or anything. Can I ask one more question? I asked Death, desperately hoping that he would allow me to ask this one final inquiry. I saw him lift up one arm, slightly pull back his sleeve to reveal a small wrist watch that sat around his right wrist. He quickly checked the time on his watch, made a quick mental calculation, then answered. Go on, but you better make it quick, Death said with a hint of annoyance in his voice. My wife and kids. When do they die? Do they still live on for a while? You are testing my patience, but okay, I will check for you. Death reached one skeletal hand into the inside of his black, tattery robe and pulled out one of the thickest books I had ever seen. The pages appeared to be endless, and on the front cover, I saw the word diary. Death flicked through the pages, quickly scanning each one, before turning to the next one. It took maybe a minute before he settled on a page. He used one bony finger to quickly find what he was looking for. He soon found it, and his fingers stood still, pointing at one name. Let's see. Your wife. She lives until 93. It says here passes away surrounded by both kids and her grandchildren. When the word grandchildren exited Death's mouth, I felt an internal struggle between sadness and joy. Sadness presented the case that I wouldn't be alive to ever meet my own grandchildren. Joy rebutted this argument by claiming that I should be pleased I have grandchildren and that my wife would get to enjoy them. In the end, joy won the debate, and I felt a smile come over my face. I'm sorry to be the one that has to do this, but it's time to go now. Death broke the silence that followed after he mentioned my grandchildren. I wasn't ready to go, far from it, but I knew that it was time. I just had one thing I wanted to do first. I motioned towards my dog, who had somehow slept through this entire ordeal. Death gave me a slight nod, which I took to mean that I had permission to say goodbye. I walked over to the large ball of fluff that I call my dog. I bent down and gave her a slight pat on her head. She stirred awake when I placed my hand on her. She looked up into my eyes, and at that moment, I knew they would be the last pair of eyes that I would ever see. I looked down into her eyes and began to speak to her. You've been a good girl. Now it's time for me to move on. You look after the family now. They're going to need you. You make sure you are there for them. Just continue to be a good girl, and everything will be all right. Goodbye. I know she couldn't understand me, her being a dog and all, but it felt good to say goodbye to someone. I gave her one final pat on the head, then a slight scratch under her chin. She has always liked that. I then led her to the back door and ushered her outside. I then walked back over to Death, who was slightly leaning on his side. I told him that I was ready to go, but asked him for one final favor. Can I leave a note for my wife? Can I leave it with you and you deliver it to her when you visit her? Oh, go on then. I'm already running late, so another minute or two won't hurt. I guess Mr. Stirth will get to enjoy an extra few minutes of life. Death reached into his robe once more, this time producing a small piece of paper and a pen. I took it off of him and began to write. Once I had finished writing, I handed the pen and the note back to Death, who quickly stuffed it back into his robe. He extended one hand towards me and motioned with his head for me to grab a hold of it. I reached out and grabbed onto his hand. It was hard, but also, because of the bone, kind of jagged. I squeezed tight onto his hand. He slightly squeezed mine. I felt the strength of his grip and the firmness of his bones. I could tell that he was definitely someone that enjoyed his milk. I looked up at Death, who was staring forwards. It was time to go. I wasn't entirely ready to go, but nevertheless, it was still time. In front of me, I saw a small light. In unison, me and Death took a step towards it, then another. With each step, the light grew bigger and encompassed more of my vision. Soon, all I could see was this bright light, and all I could do now was continue to walk into it. I didn't want to walk into it, but I felt drawn to it, compelled by it, like a moth who is afraid of light. It scared me, but I had no choice but to go towards it. The last thought that entered my head before stepping through, into the light, was the letter that I was leaving for my wife. I read the entire letter in my mind, before taking the final step. It's been a while. I hope you have had a long and fulfilling life, filled with laughter and joy and beautiful memories. Grandchildren, hey? How amazing is that? I bet they're cute, and I bet they love their grandma. I wish to see you again, and once you read this note, I guess I will see you soon after. Don't be afraid. Death is a nice guy. He will help guide you to me. I love you and trust me. I didn't want to leave you. P.S. Tell Death I say hello.